I have the joy and the privilege of continuing our series that is called Life Path. Thanks. Thanks. There it is, up on the thing. You were very good then, everyone. Well done. You all get brownie points. No, you don't. I do. Okay, no. So the verses that we are thinking about and we've been thinking about over the last 3 weeks, we're on to week 4 now, are these ideas, these descriptions of who God is. And as you read the Bible, you might find yourself recognizing throughout different places in the Bible some of these ideas and these descriptions mentioned again and again. They kind of like weave their way through like a really good tapestry to give us this picture, this understanding of who God is. And Jesus is God. We spent the whole year thinking about Jesus. So what is God like? And I would like to say at this point that even though we're going to spend probably 8 weeks on this, we will only scratch the surface of the character, the attributes, the nature of God. It is a lifelong pursuit of Jesus to know him, to know who he is, to experience his goodness and his grace and his love. But we've been thinking about the fact that what we think about God, his reputation, will determine our approach. That's true of human relationships, isn't it? If you see someone in the room, maybe you're like, oh, I want to go and talk to that person, but they seem very smart, and I'm not so sure, so I might not be near them. Or I wanted to go and talk to that person, but they were crying earlier, so I'm not sure if they're approachable. Or I want to go and talk to that person, but their resting face isn't so friendly. Some of us have not so friendly resting faces. Or the idea of what we have about somebody else or something else will determine our willingness to approach. And so we find in this book called Exodus in the Old Testament in chapter 34, God taking it out of our hands and saying, do you know what? I am going to introduce myself to you. I am going to let you know without a shadow of a doubt who I am and what I'm about, so that you know you are welcome to know me, so that you know you can trust me, so that you know you can build a life on me, so that you know I'm not far off and distant and vengeful and angry, but I'm with you in everything. I want you to understand that, not just so you have head knowledge and you can go, I know the Hebrew words. Caveat, we are looking at some Hebrew words today. But it's not about that. It's about having that understanding of who God is that changes who we are. That understanding of who God is that changes the way that we respond to God and the way that we respond to others. So let's remind ourselves of the context of these words that we're going to read together in a few moments' time. God has delivered his people from slavery. Generation after generation, living in a way with little freedom, choice, or agency. A bit like the image that Craig helped us think about. They've had a lid on their life, and now the lid has been taken off, and they're having to figure out, can I jump out of the jar? Can I live in a particular way? Can I respond in a particular way? And as God is leading them on this new life path, see what I did there? Thanks. To a new way of being ahead of doing, he's trying to teach them and show them and explain to them how to follow him. Explain to them what it looks like to be a human being as an individual and in community. They've had little choice or freedom or agency. And so as they are on this life path, as the promises and the plans of God are unfolding before them, as they are learning what it is to follow God and to trust him and to get to know him and to do that in community, God is showing more of who he is and more of what it looks like to follow him. You might have heard of something called the 10 Commandments. Don't look too closely. There's way more than 10, but the 10 are quite famous. Because God's going, hey, you've lived without knowing how to be as a people, individually and as a community. I want to show you. But at the heart of that is following me. At the heart of that is knowing who I am to you, of knowing what I'm like towards you, in complete contrast to anything else they'd ever heard or understand. And so we get to a moment in Exodus 34. For those of you who've heard it, you're already there. Well done. For those of you who are not, you can scoot over to the page or turn on a device, something like that. We're going to read it together in a few moments. So we get to overhear this conversation between a leader in their community called Moses and God himself up on a mountain. I mean, it's an incredible conversation we get to listen into. God is initiating this partnership agreement between himself, the creator of the universe, and humanity. Have you ever thought about that before? Like God, like with a word spoke and there was light. And he's like, do you know what? I really want you to know me and for you to know who you are in me. And so he's initiating this partnership agreement, a way to be in friendship together with humanity that is based not on our ability, thank goodness, but on his character. And if you know anything of the story, you'll know that this is the second time that God is making this agreement. He is slow to anger, as we thought about last week. He's very patient. The first time, Moses has gone up a mountain, and the people are waiting, and he's gone so long that they decide to take matters into their own hands, and they've already messed up the agreement before Moses is back down the mountain. And so God, in his goodness and his kindness, he is so committed to humanity, and he is so committed to this partnership that he's willing to say to Moses, back up the mountain, sunshine, here we go. I don't think he calls him sunshine. He might, we'll find out one day maybe. He's like, come on, let's do this again. And in this second time at the mountain, God describes who he is. It's the first big description that God gives of himself and his character. So I want us to use our imagination today to imagine that we are Moses. We're meant to identify with Moses in this story. Imagine that we are going up the mountain for the second time. Imagine that we are representative of this partnership agreement between God and humanity. And you might even want to close your eyes and picture yourself up the mountain. There's clouds and there's lightning and there's flashes, and it's like wonderful and terrifying and scary and exciting all at the same time. And you hear God speak really clearly. It's not like sometimes we might be like, is that God or has I had too much cheese? You know, like this is really clear. And from verse 5 of Exodus 34, this is what it says. Then the Lord came down in a cloud and stood there with him. And he called out his own name, Yahweh. The Lord passed in front of Moses, calling out, Yahweh, the Lord, the God of compassion and mercy. I am slow to anger and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin. But I do not excuse the guilty. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren. The entire family is affected, even children in the 3rd and 4th generations. So before we get to unpack that a little bit, let me just put that reminder in that Pastor Johnny has been helpfully explaining to us over the last few weeks. We come to the end of that description and we're like, eek, that doesn't sound like a nice God. What's that about? It's a picture of contrast. God is lavishing unfailing love to 1,000 generations. Not even who do you think you are can trace back that far. And the consequence of the things that we get wrong is limited. God's like, when we do things wrong, when we don't get things right, there are consequences to our choices, but I'm going to limit those consequences. And that idea of 3 and 4 generations is, in those days, those whole generations would have lived together. So he's like, it will affect a household. But my love is lavish and extravagant and unfailing of 1,000s of generations. I want you to understand who I am in this. Yes, I'm holy. Yes, I'm just. Yes, there are consequences, but they're limited. My love is limitless. My love is unfailing. And so we're meant to get from that, oh, wow, God, how amazing are you? That even in your justice, you hold back. You are merciful. So what do we know so far? For those of you who haven't been around, let me give you a quick kind of like, here's your top tips. Here's the kind of headlines over the last few weeks. We've been thinking about kind of who God is and how he introduces himself. But I wonder, give me a little wave if any of these situations apply to you. Have you ever sat at a wedding or a party or a works training event or a kids presentation evening or a meeting at church and had to introduce yourself to someone? You should all be waving because I made you do it earlier. Yes, absolutely. And you online, put a thumbs up or something in the chat. We've all had that moment, haven't we, where whether we're an extrovert or an introvert, we've had the moment where I have to introduce myself to someone. Now, I've tried to pick people that I know we don't have these names in our context. If you have these names, I'm not having a go at you. Okay. But so often, we introduce ourselves by what we do or who we're related to. Hi, I'm Floella. I work at Asda and I'm married to Bruce. If you are called Floella Bruce, I apologize. I'm not specifically calling you out. But that's how we introduce ourselves. And we describe ourselves in who we're in relationship with and kind of what we do. But God takes a step back from that and he says, no, I want you to understand who I am. I want you to understand my identity so that you'll be clear about it, so that you'll be confident in who I am, and so that you'll know what it looks like to represent me to others. So this is what he's doing. His attributes, his identity. He is Yahweh, the Lord God. For those of us who were together on the autumn nights this Thursday, we spent some time unpacking that idea. He is compassionate. We've been thinking about how he moves to rescue when he recognizes the pain in others. He is merciful. He has mercy. He's not only aware of our need to be rescued, but he does something about it. He gives us the gift of life through faith in Jesus. He is slow to anger. I know I'm not sometimes, but God is. He's slow to anger. They've messed up the agreement already, and he invites Moses back up. Even in the midst of the conversation, we're seeing God's character revealed in his actions. I'm slow to anger. He's angry at violence and sin and evil. He's not angry at us. He is in contrast to anyone or anything else we've ever come across. And so this week, we are going to unpack for a few moments the next part of the description, which was where he describes himself as filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. And you might have noticed that even just in these few verses, even in these few sentences, God repeats this idea. It's almost like he's like, hey, no, it's me, no, it's what I'm saying. This, I want you to understand, this is really, really important. There's like a repetition thing. If you ever remember anything your teachers told you, repetition for emphasis, it's this idea of God going, if you understand nothing else, please understand that I'm loving. Please understand that this is who I am. I think sometimes, particularly for those of us who follow Jesus for a little while, we think of the God of the Old Testament before Jesus and the God of the New Testament where we see Jesus' life unfold as kind of like two different characters. No. It's the same God, revealing himself through generation after generation after generation. And the thing he wants them to understand is I am loving. You would have heard Pastor Johnny speak and read from Psalm 89. This pairing of love and faithfulness is around, I think, about 126 times or so in the Psalms. So if you want to have a little look at that this week and see if you can find this little couplet where God is describing himself, or the psalmist is describing God as filled with unfailing love and faithfulness, you'll find it everywhere once you start to notice it. It's like getting a brand new car that's red, and then everywhere you go, you just see a red car everywhere, and you're like, who knew there were so many red cars around? And you're like, yeah, they've always been around, see. Dope. It's a bit like that. Like, wow, God, yes, unfailing love and faithfulness. But what does it mean that God is filled with unfailing love and faithfulness? And what does it mean to me in my everyday life? Well, I think they help us to understand two things. One, they are relational words. This is not a religious manifesto. This is not a political manifesto. This is not God giving a list of things. This is God saying, this is who I am and I want to be, and we're going to unpack it in a covenant relationship with you. Weird words, right? We'll think about them again in a few moments' time. And if God is loving and faithful, then we can trust him. That's really all I want to say to us today. And I'm just going to try and find different ways of saying it to us today. God is filled with unfailing love and faithfulness towards us. Therefore, we can trust him. So what I'd love you to do for about 1 or 2 minutes is turn to one another and try and unpack and describe your idea of what you think love and faithfulness mean, or ways that you have experienced love or faithfulness in your world, whether that's in your family, in your work environment, wherever. So I'm going to give you just 2 minutes to have a little kind of discussion about what you think love and faithfulness means or looks like. Off you go, 2 minutes. So when we use words like love and faithfulness, I think it's really easy to just go, oh yeah, we all know what those words mean, or we all recognize when we see someone being perhaps loving or unloving, when we recognize those kind of things. But in this original idea, God is wanting us to understand something so significant about who he is, that it will change the way we connect with him and others. And in the English language, if English is your first language, you will know that we have one word for love, which is love. And thanks, everyone. You guys are on it today. I might take a seat now. And we would use the same word to describe perhaps how we feel about ice cream. I love ice cream. Genuine, I really do. We might use it to describe how we feel about kids, if we have any. I love my kids. Some of you are like, no, not so much today, but that's fine. Or our spouse, if we've got one. I use the same word to talk about, I love rugby, I love my mum, I love chocolate. But we understand the context. Obviously, the way I love my mum is different to chocolate. I'm faithful to chocolate. I'm faithful to my mum. I'm sorry, mum, love you. But we understand, if English is our first language, or maybe if we've learned English, that when we use the word love, it means different things in different contexts. But in the original part of the Bible that we're looking at today, it was written in a language called Hebrew. And you can Google this stuff for yourself. If you, like me, love to find out what the original words mean, there's no kind of like secret. You can go and find out a little bit more for yourself this week if you're really interested in it. The 2 words that are used here in our English translation as unfailing love and faithfulness are 2 words that are smushed together in the Hebrew. And these 2 words are hesed, I will be saying this wrong, I apologize now, and emet. Hesed and emet. And there's no English equivalent to those 2 words together. So the nearest that we can get to is to put these 2 ideas together. And as I said, you'll see it all throughout the Bible. But let me give you some other descriptions. And you might just want to close your eyes and just think about these descriptions as an unpacking, a widening of the lens, as it were, of this idea of unfailing love, abounding love, steadfast love, long-suffering fidelity, loving kindness, unfailing love, faithfulness, truthfulness, loyalty to an agreement, promise, and partnership, committed. This is who God is towards us. Isn't that amazing? Unfailing in love and faithfulness to us. And this idea that God is trying to initiate, this relationship that he's inviting us into, is this word covenant relationship. This is the kind of partnership that God is looking for with us, those of us who follow him. He's saying, look, imagine the sort of vows between a groom and a bride. He's the groom, and those who follow Jesus are sort of likened to the bride. It's this sort of part promise, part legal contract, part agreement, where both parties say, we will be united together in love and faithfulness. Whatever happens, whatever comes. But this idea that God is introducing and initiating is that even if we mess up as human beings, even if we aren't able to keep our end of the bargain, God will not remove his love or his faithfulness from us. And that's really important as we journey through the story of the Bible. We recognize that as human beings, we mess up sometimes, right? We don't always get it right. We don't always get things the right way round. We sometimes let people down. We sometimes let God down. We sometimes let ourselves down. And God is not in heaven going, nah, bro, I'm done with you. See you later. He's not like that. He's like, I will continue. Whatever happens, I cannot not be loving and faithful towards you. And he says, I want you to join in with my love and faithfulness. I want you to receive it over and over and over and over again in small ways and big ways and in ways that feels insignificant but are massively significant. He wants us to receive it and to know it, not just know it in our heads, but experience it in our reality, that he loves us and is faithful towards us. And as we begin to receive that, as we begin to understand that, he says, then I want you to reflect that to others. Then I want you to represent my love and my faithfulness in the way that you interact with others, in the way that you engage with the world around you. Unfailing love. And he will always be that way towards us, even when we fail to be loving and faithful back. Because this is all God's idea. God chose to create humanity, not out of need, but as an expression of love. He initiated the very relationship that he is offering us. And when the original humans messed up, and it brought this separation between the kind of friendship and partnership that God wanted, that he's initiating again here, he has a plan to reunite us and to rescue us. And we were thinking a little bit about that over the last few weeks as well. That's why Jesus came. Jesus moved towards humanity, towards us, to rescue us and reunite us with God so that we could be in this partnership with him. And in Jesus, these definitions, these descriptions, these ideas are embodied, like in flesh and blood. You look at the life of Jesus and you see unfailing love to the point of death on a cross. You see faithfulness to his team who abandon him and flee and get it wrong. You see Jesus living out the very nature of God because he is God. And we can know him. He ultimately does that through his loving and sacrificial act of death and resurrection. But we also see in the life of Jesus this relational nature. We, as a community, have been in the book of where all most of the year? Oh, I'm sad now. I'm done. Carry on. No. We've been in the book of Luke. We've been exploring Jesus. We've been exploring who he is and what it looks like to follow him. And this description, we see it completely embodied and seen in the life of Jesus. We've seen it, this relational nature of God in the way that he prays and listens and acts, and he teaches his followers, his team, his disciples to do the same. We've seen this relational nature of God in the way that he called a team in the first place. He calls some men and women to be in community with him, to go on kingdom tour and adventure. He doesn't do it on his own. He could. He doesn't need us, but he chooses to involve us. We've seen the way that Jesus faithfully loved and cared for those that society said were less than and worthless, and Jesus gives them dignity and care and healing. We've seen this relational and loving and faithful part of Jesus in the way that even though when all of his team really, really messed up, betrayed him, denied him, ran away in his moment of darkest need, he still comes back to them and he says, I want you to be part of the team moving forward. We see it in the way that Peter and the other team continue to build this community where Jesus' love is for everyone, everywhere, after Jesus has died and risen and gone back to heaven. And he is still inviting us into that kind of relationship. God doesn't want us to simply know about his love and faithfulness. He wants us to know his love and faithfulness. God doesn't want us just to know about his love and faithfulness. He wants us to know his faithfulness. Because he is filled with unfailing love and faithfulness, you and I can trust him. These two ideas of his love and faithfulness are intertwined and inseparable. And he wants us to know his reputation so that it will positively affect how we respond to him. That we will be able to say, God, because you are unfailing in love and faithfulness, not just generally, but to me, I can trust you. But trust is a tricky thing, right? Because we view it often through our earthly experience. And it would not take much of a prophetic gift that in a room of this size and with some people online to know that at some point in our lives, probably all of us have experienced somebody promising love and faithfulness and not being able to hold up that promise. Or perhaps we've been the one to promise and we've broken trust with another. Because as human beings, we're flawed and we fail sometimes and we don't get it right. And the challenge for us is to not view our trust of God through those earthly lenses, but to view them through who God says that he is, who God shows us in the life of Jesus that he is, and who he wants to be in every moment of our lives, every day, whatever we're doing, wherever we are, not just in these gathered moments. The life path that Jesus invites us to walk on and to follow is one where we are building our lives on the reality that he is unfailing in love towards us and so faithful. You can trust him. You can trust your life to him. You can trust each moment to him. You can trust him with the mundane. Anybody got a few mundane and boring things coming up this week? You can trust him with the exciting. You can trust him with the tragic and the treasured moments of life. He is absolutely reliable and trustworthy. And for us as humans, if we're really honest, we can find it easier sometimes to fall in love than to maintain and sustain love. I'm not looking at any couples in any particular way who've been married for any long length of time, but we can often find it easier to fall in love than maintain and sustain love, right? God is not like that. God can maintain and sustain his love for us forever with a limitless amount of resource. He loves us unfailingly. He loves us first before we say yes to him, and he will love us forever whether or not we say yes to him, because that is who he is. And we see it most powerfully in the life of Jesus. And I want to encourage us that when we make mistakes, God's feelings towards us don't change. When we don't get it right, when we're not all that we could be, when we're not, I have a phrase that we use sometimes, firing on all cylinders. God isn't turning his back on us and saying, well, until you get that sorted out, you ain't having my love. He's not like that. He's full of unfailing love towards us. We can live securely in this reality, even when world events and personal situations are beyond our understanding. Because the promise of his unfailing love and faithfulness doesn't mean that we're not going to face challenge or change or difficulty, but it does mean that he's with us in it all. And this picture of Jesus is so powerful and so challenging, because he's that towards us and he wants us to be like him. He wants us to be loving towards others. He wants us to be faithful in the way that we are to him and to others. And we live in a world of like instant gratification, don't we? I could literally order something on my device now, and by this evening it would be at my door. I mean, it might be in my bin store because, that's a challenge. But, I could order it by tonight and it would be there. I could, like turn on the TV and there's hundreds and thousands of things. Someone could annoy me and I could cut them out of my life. We could watch hundreds of shows. We even get impatient, now be honest, in waiting for your pot noodle. Yeah, I can see some of you looking, going, yeah, don't judge me, Sarah. 4 minutes is so long. Because we live in a world where it's so opposite to who Jesus is a lot of the time. And what we're soaked in filters into who we are. And God's going, no, I don't want you to be soaked. I don't want you to pick up all those ideas. I want you to understand who I am and who you can be in me. And Eugene Peterson wrote a book many years ago, and he basically says discipleship is a long obedience in the same direction. And so much of discipleship is choosing every day to love God, choosing every day to be faithful, whether we feel like it or not, whether things are going really well for us or not, whether the world makes sense to us or not, because he promises, this is who I am, and I'm not going anywhere. You know, discipleship, we've been thinking, will take the shape of our understanding. So we need to know what our understanding of God is to make sure that it's shaped well, that we can keep coming back to Jesus again and again and again and again and again, and he will keep loving us and being faithful towards us. And I felt that there were maybe just 3 questions to ask before I help us think about how we can think about it through the week. As we say yes to Jesus, as we say yes to him making a way for us to be rescued in this partnership, we're then asked to be like him, loving and faithful, to join in with what he is renewing right now on the earth. And I just had some questions in my mind, and maybe one of these will connect with you. Are we willing to let go of offense to show love to someone? I wonder if that's just going to resonate with someone today. Oh, yeah, God, I've held that offense against someone. It's really hard to be loving and faithful if you're offended. Is there anything that God wants to speak into that? Are we willing to engage with people not like us as an expression of God's love in and through us? God, have I been trying to avoid certain people because I feel a little bit awkward and I'm not quite sure? Lord, would you help me to be loving and to be a representative of your love and your faithfulness? And will we be committed to journeying with Jesus in the ups and downs of life when we don't understand or we don't get an answer to the why question? It is absolutely okay to ask the why question. I love what you shared, Kath. But will we keep following Jesus and we don't get an answer to that? Or maybe we don't see the things that we want to see happen? Will we respond in kind and say, Jesus, I need your help to be loving and faithful to you and to others? So to help us think about that this week, I have some chairs. Thanks. I'm slightly nervous about this one, because it's on wheels, and there are some stairs there. We've done a risk assessment, honest. Look away, Mary, look away. So, when you sit down on a chair, when you came in today or at home, when you sat down on whatever chair you're on, did you think about whether you could trust the chair? Most of you, unless you've had a really embarrassing moment, which I have on occasion, most of you will just have sat down on the chair trusting that it's reliable, trusting that it'll hold your weight, trusting that it'll keep you reasonably comfortable for the duration of this meeting. I'm getting to the end, I promise. Trusting that it will bear the burden, hold the weight, give you comfort, enable you to engage in what is going on here today. I want to encourage us to use the chair in our life. I say it weird because I'm Welsh. Can someone just say chair with a Birmingham accent? Chair. Chair. Your chair sounds so weird. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm being very clear and understood. Every time you sit in a chair this week, whether it's an office chair, or it might be while you're watching the TV. Oh yeah, Big Brother. Or it might be while you're having your dinner. Oh, pie and peas and chips, lovely. Or it might be while you're in a waiting room or in an office area. It might be in a wheelchair, on a bicycle, on the bus. It can be in any chair. Don't let these scare you. But as you sit in a chair today and through the week, I wonder, would you allow yourself 60 seconds to think about the way that you can trust God? His unfailing love is going to hold you up. His faithfulness is going to be secure. His unfailing love is something you can build your life on. His faithfulness is something that will bring you comfort when you need it and strength when you need it. So we're going to practice right now. I wonder if you just close your eyes with me. And if you're not sitting in this moment, I wonder if you'll just find a seat very quickly. Just think about, put your feet, plant them on the floor. Take a big old deep breath. Think about the sense of security that is underneath you as you just let the whole weight of your whole self rest on this chair. And then allow it to be a metaphor, a symbol, an idea that helps you to remember that this is like the trustworthy nature of God, who is unfailing in love and faithfulness towards me. In my life, in whatever comes this week. God, you love me. You are faithful to me. Now, you may need to ask God to show you more of that this week. That may be what you will review as you sit down on a chair. Or it may be that you need to ask God to help you to reveal, to show that love and faithfulness to others around you. And so, God, as we take a few moments to sit in your presence, as we think about the way that you've revealed yourself, described yourself to us in words and in the life of Jesus, for those who need a fresh encounter and experience of not just knowing about your love and faithfulness, but knowing your love and faithfulness, would you give them that this week? And for those who need to find a way to express that love and faithfulness to those around them, would you give them courage and wisdom this week to see those opportunities and to join in that partnership agreement with you? God, thank you. Thank you that you are full of unfailing love and faithfulness. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.